Scene one, Apple, take one.
Hi, everyone. I'm Shane Borza. Welcome to another episode of Film Notes. This is the show where I talk to people in the film industry about what they do and get their notes on their projects, their roles, and what they've learned by doing film. So today I have a new team of connections. I have Courtney and David who are here with their new project Alienation that they're getting ready to make, I believe, this year. And so first we have Courtney Hoskins, who's the writer-director. And then we also have David Auner AAC, who's the cinematographer part of the team. So welcome both of you to the show. Thanks for being here.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
My pleasure.
So Courtney, we'll start with you. Can you tell me a little bit about, before we get into the film, like how did you get in the industry? Is this like a lifelong thing? Did you just start, maybe different roles you've had, and what led you to becoming like the writer director of this project?
Yeah, I mean, it definitely has been a lifelong thing for me. As early as second grade, I was directing kids on the playground. We had the little like Disney reader books, and I would like reenact all the Disney shows. And I was always just drawn to like behind the scenes stuff. Like whenever they broke the third wall or fourth wall, I would always just like, it just would make me so excited and happy. And we went on a Universal Studios tour when I was a kid, and just seeing all the behind the scenes stuff. And especially, I can go into it a little bit later when we talk about the movie, but my first movie theater experience was E.T. and it scared me to death. I was so scared. And to help me with that fear, my mom showed me behind the scenes of that movie to show me that E.T. wasn't real. And so that was the moment where it just kind of clicked. And she said, oh, this was based on a dream that he had. And I thought, wow, we can take our dreams and make them so other people can see our dreams. And so from there, it just kind of went. The road to getting here was very long and winding because I think, especially in the States, there's this tendency for parents to encourage their kids like up to a certain age to be creative and to go for it. And then once they get into like high school, going into college, it's like, maybe you should major in business, or maybe you should like be a little bit safer. So I kind of took this roundabout route of exploring other things, but always was the, how can I turn this into a movie? How can I make this my own? And when I was at the University of Colorado, they have a film program there. It's more on the experimental side. And I had a job. I was like the back projectionist for all the lecture halls. And I took a film studies class just because I was so interested in the topic. And the teacher was Stan Brakhage, who was a famous experimental filmmaker. And I knew nothing about experimental film. And he didn't have a projectionist. So I just kind of volunteered. And not knowing that it was 16 millimeter film projection, totally different thing from like overhead slides and stuff like that for the other lectures. But we bonded because we were the only ones getting paid to be in the class. So he'd come in early, give me the films, give me the rundown of how everything was going. And he had these weekly salons where he would show experimental films on campus, free to the public, and invite the community. And we just became like kind of friends at the end of his life. And then he moved off to Canada. I moved off to New York, but I started making experimental films. And that was how I really kind of got started in actually doing it. Because up to that point, like my brother and I would mess around with video cameras, like we recreated Jurassic Park and stuff like that. But up to that point, it was more just kind of like an idea. And, making experimental films, I started kind of, they just really struck a nerve or struck a chord with people. And, I went off to like New York Film Festival, Toronto, like all of the big film festivals that had experimental film programs. And I got to just kind of go to all of them and make connections and all that kind of stuff. And so I've just been kind of piecing it together bit by bit. But yeah, along the way, I became a software engineer and I studied astrophysics. And like, I kind of just did this, like, it all comes together. It all makes sense, especially when I talk about the movie. It all lines up. But yeah, that's kind of my story.
And David, how about yourself? Is being a cinematographer something you've always wanted to do? One of the things I love in interviewing people for the show is, and I'm sure you've heard this in the industry, you ask 100 people how they got started and you get 100 different answers.
Yeah. Let me just say, in case there's some, like wonderful smoke wafting through here, I'm sitting next to a nice campfire on Bainbridge Island because I'm actually on a scout and vacation trip with my wife, and so I'm calling in from the wild. So yeah, for me, if I go back, so my grandpa was a photographer, and he taught photography. And so I kind of grew up in the dark room with him, and he was also a woodworker and had a workshop in our basement. So I would, as a kid, hang with him quite a bit. And so he started teaching me photography at a very young age. I must have been like 4 maybe or something like that when he, just started giving me, like, he came to me with his hands like this, and there was a little film canister inside his hands that he had converted into a pinhole camera. And then he would say, okay, so take this and put it somewhere and remove your hand and keep it there for 2 minutes and then close it again and come back, right? And then he would develop the piece of paper in there for me and stuff. So, and that was obviously way before anything digital. So I'm to this day very, very drawn to film and photochemical. And so that really was the start. And then I kind of, yeah, well, my parents encouraged this. My uncle is an artist as well. I worked for him when I was a teenager in high school. So sometimes I would skip school to go on jobs with him because he kind of like would moonlight as a photographer to earn some money on the side. So, and then after, yeah, as my teenage years, I started becoming really interested in computers. And so I got into doing websites and programming and stuff like that. And along that road, was drawn into graphics, right, and 3D and 3D animation in this case. And so I did that for a bit. And my first college degree was digital film arts, which kind of was a lot of post work, animation, editing, and all that. And I still did photography, but I also started doing video in my late teens, early 20s. And I grew up in the south of Austria in Graz, and then I moved to the capital, to Vienna, and started working as a sound recordist for TV news, and started doing corporate and all that. And I've started shooting when I was like 19, so I've been shooting for forever. It's scary to think that it's been more than 25 years of doing this, right? But I didn't really do features or anything like that at the time. I was more on the corporate and industrial side and documentary side. And for 15 years, I did a lot of railway documentaries. So I would crawl around engines and was, in those pits with a camera facing up as a train rolled over me and all that good stuff. And then I started doing music videos and other narrative projects, and realized if I wanted to do this like for real, I'd probably have to go back to school. And after a couple attempts that failed, I applied to AFI in Los Angeles and went there at the American Film Institute Conservatory and did a master's in fine art and cinematography. It was about 10 years ago, and ever since I've been in LA and shooting low budget features, shooting documentaries, and the odd music video commercial.
I love hearing your 2 stories. And as Courtney said earlier, we have all these kind of zigs and zags, but they all accumulate to bring us either to the project we're working on or where we are in the career or whatever. But talk to me a little bit about how you 2 met and got to collaborate. I don't know if this is like a long-term connection or you 2 just met on your new project, but how did the 2 of you end up like on this call together and be paired on the Alienation project, which we're going to talk more about later?
So the 2 of us were working together on a movie, an independent feature, shooting actually in Colorado. And, like every low budget indie, you get to know people really, really well through all the struggles and everything. And we just really vibed, I guess would be the right term these days. But we just kind of kept in touch, and I started kind of talking to him about different ideas for projects I wanted to make. And I actually started talking about Alienation with him pretty early on, because I had been planning on shooting a different feature, which, like, pretty common story. Then COVID happened. So this was going to be like a coming of age romantic comedy shot on a college campus. So COVID, that's not going to happen. So I actually wrote this idea of like, oh, this could just be a small contained movie. We just have a very small crew. And David is such an outdoorsy sort of like get down in the dirt and get the camera up. And I was like, oh, this would be right in his wheelhouse. So we started kind of collaborating on that. And then as the pandemic was kind of winding down, I moved back to California. And I had told him about this short of mine that I tried to make a few years back, and the footage was pretty much unusable. It was very shaky. It was not what I wanted it to be. I made the kind of early rookie mistake of starring and directing in the film, which is, I think people can do it. I think if you're Angelina Jolie and you've been doing that all your life, then yeah, that's a good route to go. But for me, I think it's really hard to occupy both of those spaces. And so I kind of showed him some of the footage, and he said, well, you know what? I still want to do a 35 millimeter project. I didn't get my chance to do that, and I've got access to this camera. And so we just decided we were just going to reshoot the whole thing. And so I cast it. I got together all of these. I mean, it was just such a great collaboration back and forth. Like, we went location scouting together, and then I was stuck on a story point and went to a sound bath meditation and was just kind of sitting there. And I saw, in my mind's eye, I saw a wolf coming out of some hedges. And I mentioned it to David. I'm like, yeah, no, I really think that this could be the way of getting the character out of the scene and into the next thing. But what do we do? Do we get stock footage? Do we CGI? And he's just like, well, you live in LA, you just get a wolf. And so, like, I love that he helps me with these problem solving things. We also had our lead actress bail on us the night before the shoot. And we both were just like, hey, I'm still in if you're still in. Like, I didn't want to be in front of the camera again, but I would do it. Luckily, I ended up not having to. So that was amazing. Everything magically came together. But it feels like magically coming together. Like when we're working together, and we did a location scout and just got a bunch of footage. We have a proof of concept trailer for the movie. So we kind of recreated our character's journey, hit up all of the major stops on it. And I honestly, I think that if you can survive a road trip through the desert with someone and no one's dead at the end, that's a good collaboration. That's a good relationship. So yeah, we just have been jamming like that for, wow, what is it now? 6 years like that?
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah.
Actually,
Yeah.
no, you know what? It's gonna be 7 this fall. Yeah.
So a shout out to my preteen kids. So 6, 7.
I actually said that to my wife last night, and she goes, you don't know what that means. I'm like, you can't tell me I don't know what it means, because you don't know what it means either.
Nobody knows what it means. I don't know what it means either. It's great.
Well, David, anything from your side as the cinematographer on
Yeah.
the 7 years of collaborating?
I mean, every connection, every relationship with between the director and the cinematographer is very different and very unique, right? You have people directing who come from theater purely and have no understanding of what a camera does, and then you have people who are like Stanley Kubrick, who did this before and basically know everything there is to know. So it's kind of funny, and I've made the discovery, and that's been astounding to me, that there's a lot of directors out there, and I don't mean that as criticism, it's just surprising, who are not very visual, who it's hard, you have to find your way to talk to them, right? You have to develop a mutual not necessarily language, but an understandings, because everybody's idea of, let's say, a close-up is something different. And again, that's really not a criticism. It's just a fact that you have to find these things. And with Courtney, it was really interesting because of her background in experimental film and really manipulating actual film. When you know, we were out on that scout and we were shooting with very, very limited means. I own an RA camera, so we had that, but we didn't really have lights or anything. We just had a couple battery powered things, right? And I'm like, you know what? Let's just shoot this at 6 frames and step print it up. And Courtney doesn't go like, what the is that? She was just like, hey, that's a superb idea. Let's do it, right? And so that was always one thing where we would just riff off each other and we knew what we meant by a lot of these things. And I don't know if it's probably both a personal thing, but also an aspect of our background, because Courtney is also a photographer. She knows what cameras do, right? So I think that was one thing I really liked. And the other thing I think is I just like working with people who have a different outlook at the world and different backgrounds in many ways. So I found that I get along really well with female directors because I'm just interested in their view of the world, right? Because I do think that there's something different there. And also, just as somebody who's immigrated into this country, you also have differences in experience, but also similarities. And I think that's a very interesting thing as well, that even though we grew up, I don't know how many miles apart, but we do share a lot of like really nerdy hobbies and interests. So it wasn't a hard collaboration so far. Let's see how that ends up after the movie. No, I'm kidding. I think it's gonna go swimmingly.
Well, a couple of things just to comment. You know, the idea of like the happy accidents, and then the collaboration, the synergy, all those things are so important, especially in film. It's such a collaborative environment. I mean, when you're talking about other arts, like you might be able to paint or sculpt like all by yourself in a studio, but you've both done a lot of projects, and sometimes there's 5 people behind the camera, sometimes there's 55 people behind the camera, but regardless, you have departments and you need each of those to all integrate. And it's great when you two can overlap and say, oh, we have this shorthand, we understand each other, but you also have those differences where like someone brings in the idea of like, what if we did this? And the other person goes, I never would have thought of that if you weren't here. And it can really elevate the project. So I'm so glad that you two were able to kind of find each other and click, and also not kill each other on the the road trip, because those things are great ways to kind of like test this type of stuff and say, oh, if we can be on that set together, or we can be in that car for a week together, we could probably do this. Because that's the other part of filmmaking, is these are long projects, and they sometimes take, it's years of it's years of post. I've been sitting with this project for 5 or 10 years. And so to have a partner that you can go through all that stuff with, it's, I had another guest called, it's like the film marriage, you're together for 5 or 10 years, or the movies are your kids. So talk to me a little bit about how things move from, you're working on things separately, you started coming together, you kind of redid that project, and now, so it sounds like you're going from short to a feature. So maybe Courtney, on your side, I believe this is going to be your first feature that you've made yourself. That you've made shorts before. I know you've worked on other features, but how was that kind of jump for you to going from like I'm making a short film to I'm making a feature film? And then David, you could perhaps comment on working with Courtney on shooting or reshooting her short. I believe that the project that you redid was the short, and now you're going to be doing this feature together, which is your new upcoming project. Is all that correct?
So for me, I didn't go to film school, and I think for I'm just starting to kind of get over my imposter syndrome for that. But and I'm actually seeing it more as a strength, because I was not told what to study. I was not told, this is what you need to learn, this is what you need to do. I had to kind of discover it on my own. I had to seek it out. So there's already a drive there that I have to maintain that for myself. I don't have a curriculum. I don't have someone telling me what to do. The two things that I felt like I really missed out on with film school was a protected space to just be creative. You know, everybody gets their short film. Everybody gets a project. Well, not everybody. I think sometimes it's like a lottery system, like only some people get to make it. But anyway, everybody gets a chance. So, and then the connections, the network, and all that kind of stuff. So for the network, I just have to go work at it. And it's fine. You just meet people who went to film school, and then you meet their peers. For the other part of it, in my mind, I had to stop seeing, because I really wanted this short film to be good, to be really, really good. I didn't want to go down the route of, you know, I'm paying people in pizza. I'm over that. I'm done with that. I want to pay people what they deserve to actually do the work on the project. And you know, I wanted to do, I didn't want to do the guerrilla style filmmaking. I wanted to go through the process of getting permits and getting all that kind of stuff, which I don't even know if you have to do that in film school, but it was quite an education. It was a really, really big education. And I am, you know, and ultimately it cost me maybe 1/10 of the cost of going to film school, and I got a movie out of it. So I kind of, for me, that short was my dipping my toe into, can I sustain this going forward for a feature? And so I kind of found places where, okay, the permits and getting all of that stuff, getting all that together, that was really draining on me. That took away from my creative and my directing thing. I need to find somebody next time who can help me with that, who can do that. And the same thing with the post-production, editing, stuff like that. I can really kind of struggle with that. So for me, doing this with David was basically our way of saying, like, it wasn't a proof of concept short, because there's not really a short we can make out of Alienation. I've kind of looked into that, but this was a proof of concept of just saying, like, hey, we can do it. We can do this whole thing. It looks cinematic. It's beautiful. It's got, you know, like, all the pieces can come together and we can do it. And so I think these are just kind of like little tests that we sort of did before doing the feature. And for me, I've really kind of struggled with timing and the idea of, like, is it the right time? Is it okay? Is it? And I feel like right now is the right time. I'm a single parent, so there was just a period of my life where the logistics of going away for a month and shooting a film in the desert, it wasn't really feasible. So now my kiddo is older. He's also an actor. He's very encouraging. He's almost like a teammate at this point, and really like kind of exploring. And I've got all kinds of supports around me. We now live in the same city as his dad, and his dad is on board. So like all of these things are kind of like all coming together, and I've got good partner support and everything. So it just, the timing and everything just seems right. And then as you start doing that, as you start saying yes to yourself, I feel like there's all these signs around you where you start seeing the green lights everywhere. So we're like, yes, now is the time to move forward. Well, now the government's dumping all these UFO files on us. Like, it just keeps you just kind of keep finding those excuses to keep going rather than excuses to stop. So I don't know if that kind of answers.
Very much so. And for people who maybe, you know, I always assume sometimes, like, oh, I'm in season 5, everyone's been following along, but sometimes it's like, well, no one's seen the show or heard of me before. So I've been in film for like 20 years, but I also am both a life and a mental health coach. And so I talk to a lot of people about dealing with things like imposter syndrome, or allowing success to be redefined. And sometimes success is waiting until the right time, or waiting until like things align. And sometimes you do have to like punch through that wall no matter what. And sometimes you go, well, maybe I don't have to beat myself up trying to break through these bricks. So I resonated with a lot of what you said. I'm glad that some of this stuff has started to come together, because it is a happy accident. Sometimes you go, oh, by waiting a couple of years now, alien stuff's in the news because of these. Oh, now it's the perfect time. Great.
Yeah.
But sometimes we aren't able to see that. So I'm glad that you have that experience. So David, for you, talk to me a little bit about going through this process, because it sounds like it's been a little bit of like figuring things out, like you said, shooting the promos and getting some of this stuff together so you could start to promote the film.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if it sounds like you're shooting this on film, not digitally. Is that right too? And what were some of the choices there?
Let me just start off by the whole imposter syndrome thing. Going to AFI does not cure that. I can absolutely give you that in writing because I'm facing the same thing. And I also think that there's something positive in there, because if you go onto set in the morning and you feel like you know what you're doing, you should stop. Because I think it really kind of keeps you from approaching story with a fresh set of eyes. And you want to be on the edge. You want to push the envelope, right? So I think that there is a good balance that is somewhere to be found in between being paralyzed by that and being encouraged by it. And the interesting thing, I just want to add to what Courtney said. So, I mean, at AFI, they really teach you the studio way of making films, right? So you have to permit everything. There's absolutely no way to cut corners. Like, you have to abide by all the SAG rules and all that good stuff, which as a cinematographer, obviously you don't have to physically do because you have producers, but still you get to deal with all that stuff. So I was well prepared by that. And let me say, the difference for me between a feature and a short is twofold. On one hand, it's easier because you have more time, right? In a 15-minute short, you don't have time to explain stuff, right? And I don't mean explain like as exposition dialogue, but you don't have to explain things. You have to explain things in a very short way in terms of story. Whereas on a feature, you have more time for that. And the flip side, of course, is that you need way more stamina on a feature, because if you're shooting 12-hour days for like 3-4 days, that's one thing, but doing that for 4 weeks or 5 weeks is a whole different story. And I think that's the only big difference. Other than that, whether you're shooting small projects with your friends to big stuff. I mean, I personally haven't done this, but some of our teachers at AFI have shot $400 million movies. And they basically told us, there's no difference. We face the same problems. We don't have enough money, as crazy as that sounds. We don't have enough money for this. We don't have enough money for that. So you just have to do it the same way we do it on a student film. The same thing we did. Courtney and I were like, oh, this wolf is kind of pricey, but yeah, we need a wolf, so let's do it, right? And for shooting 35, so on the Knot, our wolf project, that was basically an exercise that at AFI you normally do as a cinematographer in the second year, where you get to kind of drive the project. You can direct it, you can produce it, but you can also bring in other people. But that has to be shot on film, has to be around 3 minutes long, and it can have sound, but it can't have dialogue. So that was, to me, the thing where I was just like, well, this sounds like something we could do that way. Why don't we do this as a replacement for that exercise that I never got to do? And then moving on to Alienation, we don't really know what the Alienation is going to be shot on at this point. Maybe there's a world where it could be on 35. Maybe it's not going to be. So that's, there's many ways to do this. And I think that was the interesting thing about this journey as well, that when we first started talking about this project, it was like, very guerrilla, very, very small, like basically one actress in a van and some VFX or practical effects, and maybe like 3-4 people in the crew. And then we started talking about it, and there's also like a $40 million version of this movie, right? And I don't think it's going to be either of these two, but it's still an interesting exercise how the same story can be told in a variety of ways, in a variety of scopes and scales, right? And I think that's a very important, not lesson, but takeaway from this for people who want to do something like this, is that you can tell an excellent story with absolutely minimal stuff and people, but you could, if you had the money, could do this as a really big movie, right? And and not sacrifice it on the story you want to tell.
Well, Courtney, let me bring it back to you. We've been talking about the Alienation project and around it, but tell us, like, what is the story, what is the project, and where can people find out more about it? I know you have a seed and spark and a promo trailer and some of that you might like to share. Sorry to stop the show, but we've got some bills to pay around here. And to do that, I wanted to point out a couple things I've got on offer at ShaneBorza.com. As both a master level mental health coach and an award-winning filmmaker, I have the experience and expertise to help you go further faster, regardless of whether that is in your production or life. I am psyched to announce all my courses and books have been updated and expanded and are available on both Apple Books and at my shop. Especially wanted to point out my Film Notes book and workbook, where you can learn everything you need to make your film and get it out to the world. If you need help with either your life or film, please reach out. And now, back to the show.
As David was saying, this started out as something we could shoot during the pandemic. 4 or 5 people. I was so sad that my other project wasn't going to happen. So I started kind of writing this, and initially I just kind of wrote it for the situation. And we were all terrified. And so it became a horror movie. And the idea was, she goes out into the desert to document UFOs, and things happen and she goes missing, and then she comes back and we don't know. So it was like a little on that. I started writing that though, and I realized, like, I didn't want to tell a horror story. I didn't want to be in that space at that time. And I started kind of writing it, and a lot of times this happens, like, you don't really know the story until you start writing it. So you start with this little idea. And in my case, it started with my son, who I think was 6, 7 at the time. He wrote this short story. It was just like a sentence, and it was, she thought it was a star, but it was a shooting star, but it was really a UFO. And I was just intrigued by that idea, because usually it's the opposite. You see something in the sky, you're like, oh, it's a UFO. No, it's a plane, or it's a flock of geese, or it's something mundane. So I was like, oh, that's interesting. Like, what if that? And so I kind of, took that as my inspiration. And as I was thinking about it, I was just kind of like, well, but why would somebody do this? I wouldn't do this. That's terrifying. Going on my own in a van out to the middle of the desert. What drives a person to want to do this? And so I started getting this idea of this person being more kind of desperate for the views, desperate for the attention, and that desperation for the attention overrides personal safety. And we see this right now happening with people with social media. There are all sorts of horror stories of people getting into accidents, or even losing their lives because they tried to get some cool thing for Instagram or whatever. And so I started becoming intrigued by that. And then we were also in the height of the pandemic, where we were in some ways more connected than ever. I always say that pandemic was so, I appreciate the timing of it, because, we did live in an age where we had QR codes and Zoom and all of this stuff. Like, I couldn't imagine that happening in the 80s, but despite that, we still felt so lonely. Those connections weren't real connections. And I started kind of researching influencers and researching, I've always been sort of fascinated by celebrities, especially young ones, like how they get through that, everyone knowing everything about their life. And, I think for a lot of people at first, it sounds really appealing. That many people love me, they're really paying attention. But, part of the thesis of this film is that there's a difference between getting views and being seen. And so our character wants the views, but she needs to be seen. And so by kind of going on this journey of why she's looking for more, she's looking for, are we alone? in a bigger sense of like UFOs and all of that kind of stuff, but are we alone individually? So this road trip gives her the chance to not only just kind of, you know, she starts in a very sort of self-centered way of documenting this sort of thing, but along the way she kind of meets this strange community, which I've come to know over the past few years of working on this project. There's so much variety in the UFO world out there. There's the very like hardcore government conspiracy people. There's the cheap trinkets in the gift shop people. There's the very woo-woo spiritual, like we're going to commune with them on the mountaintop. So I just started becoming fascinated with the whole thing, and how there's this deep idea of the notion of UFOs. And I'm not going to go into ancient aliens, but this idea has been with us for thousands of years, and it's taken on different forms at different points in time. We've got like fairy folk, we've got the jinn, we've got all of these different sort of strangers that come in the night, and maybe there's, you know, some trans-dimensional, like whatever there, but this like sort of vaguely human other thing has been with us for a really long time. Angels and demons and all that kind of stuff. And our connection with the sky has been, I mean, that we all see some parts of the same sky, at least the sun and the moon. So, you know, and some places have the same name for constellations on completely different sides of the planet, completely different. I think Sirius is a dog. The idea of it is a dog both in the West and in China. I think that the name for that star is a dog. And I'm like, why? It's just a star. It's just a piece of light in the sky. So I just, that idea that we could connect with each other through the vastness of space, rather than, you know, right here on our phones, just right in our face, that is kind of where alienation lives. And so we're kind of exploring the UFO phenomenon, which is just exploding right now. There's so many things. And I'm really excited for Spielberg's new movie. Close Encounters of the Third Kind is like one of my favorite movies. But also we're really questioning mental health and being constantly online. And now we've got the specter of AI. Like, can we even believe what we see? If she saw a UFO and filmed it, like, would we even believe it if we saw it? Or would we just like shrug it off and dismiss it? So yeah, there's just a lot of really interesting things that we're kind of exploring with this movie.
Now, David, before I get to you, I just want to comment on a couple things. First, when you were talking about the character, like, well, I would never do this, it reminded me. So I did go to film school, but I went in Australia, and it was like an international film school. And the head of the writing department always used to say, you know, if you go in somewhere and someone says something like, well, I would never do that, and they're like, yeah, but that's a great character. Like, because it's the, you know, if you watch Dexter or any of those things, you go like, I've never met anybody like that. You're like, yeah, it's this singular, unique person who reacts in a way that most of us never would. And we get to kind of live vicariously, for better or worse, through the decisions that they would make that we never would. And it makes that character compelling. But the other thing, you really spoke about the different layers of the story, like the huge story of like, are aliens real or not? And then the small story of like this person and what she wants and what she needs. And so I always think that is a great way to see like smart writing, because there's a lot of layers to the story, even if it's a small story of like a girl in a van by herself or what have you. There's a lot there. So it sounds like there's good meat, so to speak. David, I wanted to ask you, especially since you're collaborating through the process, it's not just like, hey, I have a project, I'm going to hire someone and they're going to show up and we're going to do it. How are you thinking along the lines of like capturing some of this stuff, not only like the reality of like we're shooting the desert in a van or whatever, but also like capturing some of these larger elements like the night sky and is or is that not, you know, UFO in the night or what have you. I'm sure there's a lot of challenges on both sides, because on one hand, it sounds like it's very intimate, you know, this person and her phone or her laptop in a van by herself. And on the other hand, it seems like big scope.
I mean, for me, one thing that also attracted me to this is I'm somebody, I think, who thinks in a very scientific way in general, and I'm not somebody who, you know, believes in anything easily, whether that's a god or a deity or whatever. But on the other hand, I'm absolutely convinced that we're not alone, because the statistics just tell us that the probability for life out there is 100%, because this place is so vast and so diverse and so huge that it has to be this way. We cannot be alone. That's just a scientific fact to me. And then it's just because we were talking about Spielberg's new movie. I don't know if you guys saw Neil deGrasse Tyson on the Colbert Show, because he's got a new book where he talks about how to behave in case you meet aliens. And if somebody like that, who's absolutely an amazing physicist, right, believes in that, quote unquote believes, I have to be in the same page, right? And I'm also always have been a huge fan of sci-fi, so I've read a lot and I've seen a lot, obviously. And Close Encounters that Courtney just mentioned is probably the movie we talked about the most in reference for this, even though it's a very different movie. And the interesting thing about this, as you say, is this contrast between the small and the big, right? Because for me, it's like, I'm absolutely the person who would go like, oh, fuck yeah, we're going to spend a month in the desert and go look for something by myself in a van. Yeah, I would do that. So, and I'm like, oh yeah, no, let's just, I don't know, all kinds of crazy things that I have done or would do, where other people go like, why did you do that? And so we have a lot of this very focused on her, on our main character. And that's a very interesting challenge, to shoot that and keep it interesting on the one hand. And then there's also, not many, but there's a couple like big night exteriors, like where we need to see the landscape, because the landscape is a character in this, right? The southwest of the US plays a big role in this, because that's where so many of these sightings have been taking place, right? Where the how shall I put this, the lore and the mythology is concentrated, right? And I mean, I'm pretty close to Mount Rainier right now, where one of the first sightings happened in '48, with a pilot seeing some weird stuff, right? But most of it is really down there, and I think that's also an important part to the story, and I'm looking forward to figuring out a way how to pull that off on whatever scale of alienation we end up making. Because again, there's a Hollywood solution to this, right? Which means you put all the lights on the freeway, if you're Tarantino and you can afford that. But the let me put it this way, budget version of this is you just wait for dusk and shoot it at the precise right time when you can see everything you want to see. So that and I think the challenge between those things is one thing that's really interesting here. And I think this is also um, an opportunity, because when you talk to cinematographers, I think most people believe that most of us are just about, oh yeah, what camera and what lenses and what light. But to me, the first thing I think about is story. And Courtney and I have been talking about this for so long that, I mean, even though I wouldn't want a co-writing credit or any of that, but when you talk about a story for 5 years, there's, and even if it's by pure osmosis, there is some ideas of mine in the script, right? And I think that's the beauty of working with somebody for a long time, because you really get to kind of like connect to a story on a different level when you've read. I don't know what was the first draft I read, and where are we now? I don't even remember. And it kept getting better and better, right? And if you manage to put a little bit of your own thinking or your own ideas into something like this, it enables you to be more deeply connected, and I think that makes it better from the filmmaking side of it too.
I really want to echo that idea of, and I've heard people talk about this, that there really are two directors in a film. There's the director and there's the director of cinematography. And that's what they call it, the director of cinematography. And it really is the collaboration of, the director coming in and saying, here's the story I want to tell. And the DP being like, well, how are we going to show it? And as I mentioned earlier, if you have good collaboration between the two, you elevate each other and you come in with the ideas that the other person might not have had. And so it's great to hear that you have as Courtney was saying before, the happy accident of the pandemic to give you more time to flesh this out and find yourself going from that initial draft to the current one and saying, oh, it's just gotten better as we go on. Now, you're talking about the different versions of the movie. So I want to hand this kind of back to Courtney and say, I know you have Seed and Spark. So what's going on with the project? How can people get involved or spread the word or contribute to help you get going? And where can they see, I know you have a concept trailer and things like that out.
Yeah, so we have alienationmovie.com. That's kind of where they can find everything. Got some like a little bit of a lookbook there and about us and all that kind of stuff. It also links directly to the Seed and Spark from there. Right now, the Seed and Spark is mostly for development. So it's 20,000, which just still seems like a lot of money. We're not going to shoot the movie for that much money. So this is really for us to, work with our casting director, make sure the script is nice and tight, maybe do some storyboarding, definitely all the fun stuff of like getting a legal team together and getting the business made and all of that stuff, which costs a lot. But for me, having that in place before you go to people and saying like, trust me with $3 million, that goes a long way. So it's not just like, oh, this is just like paperwork stuff. This is really important to get this part of it done. And yeah, like I've always kind of envisioned this because it does have the social media aspect of really going for an audience and really getting into like the UFO fans, the sci-fi fans, like all of these people, getting them on board, not only with the crowdfunding, but also some crowdsourcing. She's an influencer. She's watching videos. Like, I would love for people to share like their sighting videos. Like, I would love to put some of that in the movie and really like make it a big community thing. And so like some of our like at the 25 or up level, you get like, we'll take your face and Photoshop it onto a little video and you get abducted by a UFO, and it's cheesy and it's funny, but it's cute. And it's really just kind of a way to kind of share and like really kind of like, I'm on board, all this kind of stuff. We're also like, we're doing the podcast, which is awesome. That's the other thing is like, you start asking people to contribute. And I think a lot of people get it in their head of like, oh, the money, we got to watch the meter as it goes up. But really, like, I've gotten so many people just being like, hey, I am an actor. I am this, I am that. I'm a music person. I'm an editor. And so like, it's also a way to kind of find your people in addition to funds. So it's really fun to do it kind of this early on and get it going. And then, yeah, I think once we kind of get that in place, because the script is really tight where it is now, it'll go fast. And so that's where I like, before pushing go on this Seed and Spark campaign, I really wanted to make sure that I was ready to jump on this train, because it'll leave the station whether I'm on it or not, because people are already like, they're like, where can I see this movie? I'm like, well, you have to wait a little bit. But I think it's really, people want to see it. It just sounds fun to them. It sounds like just very a current thing. So I'm just really, it's not just about the money, but it's about the connections. And it's also just about the feeling of it. Like, it's amazing. So many of these people are people I went to middle school with and elementary school. They've seen how long I've wanted to do this. And they're still, because we get in our heads of our age and it's like, oh my gosh, I've been talking about this thing and I'm not doing it. And everybody's going to lose faith in me and all that kind of stuff. And it's just not, it's not true. People are just like, yeah, you're still doing it. You go. So it's just really been, it's been a really great trip. But yeah, that's the biggest, just alienationmovie.com. And from there, just find everything, sign up for the mailing list. And we have a Patreon. Again, all of that links out from the main page. So, yeah.
To add on what you said, I think that what's so cool about this project is that every single individual person that I told about it was like, hell yeah, I want to see this. Every single person. It's And because everybody finds something in there, right? Whether you're somebody who's into camping and going out in the wilds, whether you're somebody who's into social media, or you're into, you know, not a necessarily coming of age story, but a personal growth story, right? Whether you're a sci-fi fan, all of these things are in there, and I think it's a very timely movie, but also a timeless movie, because the theme, or themes are eternal in a way. It's like, who are we? Why are we here? How do we connect to each other? And that's been very interesting. And it's really crazy when you do these things, because I have a hard time asking people for stuff. And I'm not talking about asking your good friend to move, because I would do that for them too, but asking somebody to give money to a project. And I have done this once previously, because at AFI, you get some money from the school, but you're supposed to fundraise. And I was mind blown that, you know, there was this kid that worked for me on a couple shorts that I did in Austria. And he was in his, like, maybe he was 20, 21 or something like that. And I'm sure he didn't have a lot of money, but he pitched in $20, because he was just like, oh, this sounds cool. And the same again here. I mean, I have a bunch of emails I need to go through, because I'm traveling right now, that where people are like, so we really want to support this. How can we do this? And blah, blah, blah. And so I have to, you know, talk to them, and friends of my parents and high school teachers that I didn't even have in high school have already donated money. So, and I think it's the way to look at this is not that, like, you're asking for something, you're also giving a lot to people, because people like to go on trips. And this is a metaphorical trip in a way, but it also is a visual in the movie, right? That it's enjoyable for people who don't do this to follow along with this process, because our world, I mean, we have been doing this for so long, right? All of this stuff is so normal to us. And when you live in LA, you're enveloped in this crowd of people. You know, you sit down at the coffee shop and everybody's talking about scripts and movies and all that still, despite the recent downturn. But for the vast majority of people out there, what we do is really freaking cool, and they want to be part of it. And I think that this is a way to give people the opportunity to be part of something like this. And I think that's the cool thing about crowdfunding in general, but especially for a movie, because we make a pretty weird product, right? You pay for it, and you paid in full, and only then do you get to see it at the theater. And it's normally, you wouldn't buy a car unseen, right? But a movie you buy unseen, and it's a fun way of telling stories, and I think people love to be part of this.
So I want to remind people, and you both spoke about a couple of these things. You know, every time you make a new film, you're starting a new business from scratch. And so Courtney, talking a little bit more about the logistics of, like, starting a company, raising the money and getting the logistics, and you have to do clearances, and you have, like, there's so much back end stuff. And then you both spoke about, you know, you start a new business and you have to build a brand, you have to build a community, you have to get people to want the shoes that you're making, or in this case, the movie you're making. But it really is redefining how people, like, in-kind donations that you were talking about. Like, well, I can give you my time, I can give you my expertise, like, I can help promote, I can do whatever. There's a lot of ways for people to be involved, and they love to be involved. And when you were talking about using people's media, or like putting their face on the things that they, you know, it reminded me, I grew up, I love B movies and exploitation films and, like, horror movies and zombie movies. And so I was on a stunt team when I was younger, and I got to be killed as a zombie in a zombie movie. And you're like, this is the greatest thing ever. And that's the type of thing that people will be like, oh my God, I've always wanted to be abducted by aliens, and I get to do that because I was a part of this film. And they can watch it and be like, oh my God, I'm going up into the ship. And then they want everyone to see it. And so it's providing these people an opportunity to, like, have the thing that they may not have even known that they wanted, until they go, oh my God, I could be, or my video could be in this movie. Like, hell yes. So those are such great creative ways. So I'm glad that you're starting to think about all those things. Let's move to some film notes.
Yeah.
It's called Film Notes after all. So Courtney, let's start with you. What might be some notes for people who want to, and you can approach this a couple of ways, want to be a writer director like you, or maybe make their first feature, or any of the other things you've talked about. But what really stands out is either some lessons learned that you might want to share, or some things maybe you wish you'd known that might be really valuable for other people.
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, the biggest lesson is film is collaborative, and that collaboration is based on trust. I really, really just balk at the auteur idea of like, oh my gosh, I'm the director and this is like, but you have to also be careful because too much collaboration, you lose the thread of what the movie is. So I love collaborating with David because he sees the story. And so when he has a story note, like he said, of kind of a co-writing of it, he'll just tell me the way he sees something and I'll be like, oh my gosh, yes. And I'll go back to the script and kind of like, because I can kind of see it in a different way. I have had people though who have read the script who are just like, there's not enough UFOs. There needs to be an invasion. Or, I'm like, and it's like, it's great. I love that. That's a different movie. That's not this movie. So maybe we'll work together in some other way. But I think it's really important to keep in mind that, like David was saying, this is fun. People do want to collaborate. People do want to be a part. And we saw this with the short that we made. The fact that we had a 35mm camera and real live wolves on the set, there were people showing up. Somebody came and they're just like, yeah, I'm just checking in. Who do I check in with? I just flew in from New York City. And I was like, for my short, you flew in from New York. Like, it's just amazing how people, and you never know what it is that really wants them, that makes them want to kind of collaborate with you. But you always, and I feel like I have a fairly good sense, like good radar of like, I can sense when someone wants something that I can't give them. Collaborate and definitely be open to ideas, but be clear on what you see and make sure that your closest collaborations, the cinematographer is one of the biggest collaborations you have as a director, that there is so much trust there, that relationship is solid and sound. And like, David, he's incredibly talented technically and artistically, but that's not enough. That's not enough. So the fact that he has been on board and that he has been, I used to do improv, and the whole idea of yes and is, I feel like everybody in the world should take an improv class, just an improv 101, everybody, but find your yes and people. So for David, it's just like, I have this idea, and it's like, yes, and we can shoot it on 35, and we can bring in a real wolf. So find people who want to kind of play like that. Another thing I would say is that as I'm kind of into my middle ages, this is especially for younger people, just like don't give yourself dates. Like, when I first kind of came out to LA, I was like, well, you know what? If my first thing doesn't happen by the time I'm 25, I'll just call it quits and I'll go move on to something else. 25 comes, I'm like, okay, 30. If it doesn't happen by the time I'm 30, that's it. I have to take it as a sign. But you really should not do that because you never really know what life is going to do. And I mean, there's so many stories too about people who, they were child actors and you didn't hear from them for 30 years. And then suddenly they're winning Oscars. Like, you just don't ever give yourself a deadline or a hard out. And if you really have one, then this probably isn't the world for you, because you have no control over any of that. You really don't. And like, you just have to be really good at reading the signs of just kind of sussing things out and seeing an open door and going through it, or seeing where a door is closed and maybe just leaving that one alone. Like this feature that I wanted to shoot, the college campus coming of age rom-com, it's not never going to happen. It's just definitely not the movie I want to make right now. So it's just kind of, you really have to just be open. but not, I mean, that's just a famous quote, like, keep an open mind, but not so open your brains fall out. Be open, but don't say yes to everything, but just like, don't be too firm with yourself. That would be my biggest tip.
Yeah, great stuff. And David, how about from you?
I think the first thing that I really want to say is, because for example, I call myself a cinematographer because we are writing with light and motion and we're telling a story that way. I am not directing the photography, and to me that is a different mode of working. I want to be in the middle of it. I feel bad when I'm not at camera, when I'm standing at a monitor and I have three camera operators, and that's again not any disrespect to the amazing camera operators out there, some of which are far better than I am at operating a camera, but it's just not my way of working. I want to be in the middle of it. I want to be next to the camera. I want to be the person that the actor looks to when cut is called. The first person every actor, every actress out there looks at is the camera operator. And that's the best moment you can be at. That's an amazing feeling, because it's always this look that goes like, was this good? I'm there for my director. I'm not there for my ego. That, I think, is a very, very important thing, because if you want to be the person running the show, then be a director. Don't be a cinematographer, because that's not your thing. And that's coming out of that, it makes it a little hard sometimes, because there's nothing I can do by myself, right? As a writer director, you can sit down with your iPad, computer, whatever, and start writing a story on an empty page. That's not a possibility for me, because I need to be hired. I need to be brought on board. And I think that there's a beauty in both of these, of course. And I love working with people who have ideas and then contributing a little bit to that. But on the other hand, it's sometimes very frustrating, because what do you do if you don't find a story, right? And at this day and age, I'm in my mid-40s, and there's a lot of people out there who think that older people, in quotes, I don't know, are more difficult to work with or are more opinionated or something like this. And a lot of young filmmakers have other young people to work with. And I can only say that that's a huge mistake. Hire the most experienced people you can find, whether that's a cinematographer or a gaffer or a production designer. Go for the old people. They've done it many, many times, and they will elevate your work by far more than you think. And all the good ones are not going to be difficult to work with. Yes, there is people who are difficult to work with, but that's an ageless thing, right? That doesn't mean that I would never think that age makes you more difficult to work with. The one thing I will say is that when we older, more experienced people say, let's not do this because it's dangerous, listen. Because we've seen so much go wrong. And I can say that as somebody who's lost friends in this industry. One of them was up on the set of Rust. She was a dear friend of mine. And there's things where we should say no. And when we say no, it usually is for good reason. That's the one thing. And the other thing I would say, as a young person coming into this, get out there and do as much as you can on set. Work as a PA, look into different departments. You might not even know what you like about making films, right? Because I remember when I was starting, I thought that all the stuff that I was interested in was the director who decided that. But only then I realized that this is actually cinematography that I'm interested in, right? And so you might find that you think you want to be a director, but then you end up working for the art department and finding your spot there. But go out there, work as much as you can, learn from people, and once you think you have a little experience, what you're doing a little bit, make your own little projects with your friends, and you'll be surprised how much you can do with that. But I really think, especially in film, because it's so collaborative, look at how people have done stuff. Watch as many movies as you can. Watch weird movies. Watch stuff from 1970 Czechoslovakia. Watch Cuban films. Everything you can find, and then distill your own point of view from that. But really look into why we have done things the way we've done them, and not say, oh, I'm young and I'm going to revolutionize this business. which you might as well do. I mean, maybe you never know, but don't go out there with the idea knowing it all better.
Really good stuff from both of you. I really echo a lot of the things that you both said, and I think it's really important. I heard a speaker recently say that the young have the energy and the enthusiasm, and the old have the wisdom and the experience, and it's really where the two meet that you have that synergistic explosion of like learning from your elders and then getting inspired to get up off the couch and like go do it one more time from the young people. Now, before we come to a close here, I really wanted to make sure we spotlight both of you. I know we've talked a little bit about the film and the website and the Seed and Spark and how to get there, but where can people connect with you, follow you, see what you're doing, or reach out to you?
I'm kind of out there all over. Pretty much every social media, I'm Captain PJ, which has a story that we won't go into. But yeah, Captain PJ on Instagram, on not on Twitter anymore. Threads and Facebook, and I think the only one where I'm different is YouTube. Just Courtney Hoskins is my YouTube. I don't do a whole lot there anyway, but yeah, Captain PJ. And then the movie itself has alienation.movie is Instagram. And again, you can find it all on the alienationmovie.com website.
And I'll make sure that there's links and the images for all the screenshots of all those. So I usually say this at the end, but I'll just remind people, a lot of times people are listening to a podcast. This is a show about film. So it is a YouTube show that you can watch. And I always encourage people, if you're listening to podcasts, that's great. It's convenient to drive and listen to something, but go to YouTube and watch it so you can see the people talking. You can see like the film poster. You can see, the trailer. You can see the web page and all of that.
You can see my incredibly cute puppy that was behind me most of the time.
Yes, exactly. And David, for you, where can people follow and see more of you and your work?
I think from the socials, my main platform, as with most of us, is Instagram. That's a really good place to find me. It's just David Auner. And my little icon there is my face with a rainbow dispersion over, so that's easy to find. And then I'm also on Facebook, which I use quite a bit as well, especially for the amazing groups there, where there's so much, like, you want to know something about a specific kind of film camera, you can find your group there. So that's a lot of experts there for our topics or lighting or whatever. And I do a bit of YouTube, not that much, and I've recently been on a similar kind of idea, but that was focused on lighting, which is a video podcast, and it's called The Lighting Plan, and I did a little lighting exercise there, so that's something people could watch. It has been released recently, and and then there's also my website is just davidauner.com, and people can reach me there, and good way to just reach out personally is just a Instagram DM or Facebook DM. That's where you'll find me, or just shoot me an email through the website.
Yeah, I also should add I have CourtneyHoskins.com as a website as well. So unrelated to this specific movie.
Perfect. Well, I appreciate you both coming on and talking a little bit about not only all the things you've done, but also Alienation. It sounds like a great project. And then I saw the concept trailer and I was already sucked in. So you're maintaining your 100% rating of all the people who see it wanting it to happen. Thanks again for being here. I really encourage people, follow Courtney and David, follow the film, get involved any way that you can. And as a reminder, this is the Film Notes Show. It comes out every month on both YouTube and on your podcast platform of choice. So please like, rate, subscribe, all the things. And if you want to contribute, I am on Patreon, and that is very helpful. So thank you so much for being here, and we'll see you next month.
Thank you, Shane.
Live long and prosper.
Thanks for watching. If you'd like to support the show, please click on the link below. You can also contact me at my website if you have any questions about filmmaking or anything else. Off to the side, you'll see a couple of my books, Film Notes and the Film Notes Workbook. I encourage you to check those out if you'd like to learn more about filmmaking. See you in the next episode.
Scene 1, Apple, take 1.